We're glad you're alongside. It's another weekend, and it's our program called Moral Side of the News. Thanks for joining us. I'm John Blim with the WHAS Crusade for Children. And again, with me this week is a distinguished panel. Reverend Harriett Akins-Banman, Centenary United Methodist Church, New Albany. Reverend Daniel Corrie Shull, Burnett Avenue Baptist Church. Rabbi Stan Miles, Louisville Melton School. And Father Tony Smith, Archdiocese of Louisville. There are big news headlines again this week. Let's start with two of them. The world is watching Ukraine as Russian President Putin continues the attack, and President Biden plans a trip to Europe in response to it. Meantime, closer to home, Governor Beshear decided that the pandemic-related heartache is far from over, so he vetoed a bill and kept higher food stamp benefits for more than 500,000 Kentuckians. Two unrelated topics, but both of them sending ripples. So now turning to our panel on Moral Side of the News, let's begin with a talk and your thoughts about the extension of food stamp relief.
It's the right thing to do. How can we pull back support for families who are already having trouble making it when we go to the grocery store and see what the prices are? And to pull back $100 on that, I used to fill food boxes and follow the state protocol of how many cans each family could get for a month, and that barely got them through 2 weeks. So how is it wise that we would cause more hurt to families who are already hurting? Makes no sense to me.
I think it speaks to it seems to be the aspiration of the Kentucky legislature to be as cruel and as mean-spirited as they possibly can be. It is as if they wake up in the morning and imagine, how can we hurt people today? To take food off the table of people who are already struggling in the context of the economic disaster created by COVID-19, in the context of rising gas prices that are astronomical. I used to pay $45 to fill up my vehicle. Now I'm paying $77 to fill up my vehicle. And the legislature spends time drafting legislation to literally take food off of the table from people who need it the most in the richest nation in the world. That speaks just to cruelty in a time of war, in a time of uncertainty, in a time of economic instability. We need to be looking out for the least of these. And so I'm proud of Governor Beshear. I'm so delighted that he is vetoing that bill. But I really, this is Moral Side of the News. So we ought to speak to the moral aspects of issues. I really wonder where our colleagues are, our clergy colleagues are, as it relates to speaking to their congregants week in and week out. These legislators in Frankfort are members of Baptist and Presbyterian and Catholic and Methodist congregations all across this Commonwealth. And I'm just concerned about what type of sermons, what type of Bible studies and Sunday school lessons are these individuals hearing that makes them think that what they're doing in Frankfurt is really carrying out the mandates and the mission of Jesus Christ.
And also the mission that came about long before Jesus of Nazareth, the mission the biblical prophets have laid down to us, starting with the greatest prophet of all, Moses. I just see food being taken out of the mouths of children, and it enrages me. It enrages me to the same point that it enraged me a few years ago to see those images of children who were trying to cross the border, put in cages. This isn't America. This is not moral.
Last stats I heard in regards to children in Kentucky is about 25% of our children go to bed hungry every night. And that was before the epidemic or the pandemic and all this other stuff. Two other comments. One is we're in the Lenten season, supposedly, and we in our tradition say there are three disciplines of Lent. One is fasting, one is prayer, of course, and one is almsgiving. And it seems like, first blush, the first time you read through this preparation for this document, it sounds like that's in violation of kind of the Lenten. You were asking, Corrie, about what people are hearing. You know, in our tradition, they're hearing very much about those three disciplines and how that impacts day-to-day living, and also how it impacts our love of neighbor. And so that, to me, this would fly. I agree with you. This would seem to fly in the face of it. Also, a more practical question. I'm not sure of the answers. Anybody know? Does this extending this $50 million, does it redound back to the pocketbook of Kentucky, or I thought this was federal money? And if it is, how does that impact the wherewithal of Kentucky? It seems like the legislature is saying they just want to get rid of this process, even though they have time now until April before it really ends. And I find that morally reprehensible as well, that it's something that doesn't impact our pocketbook. It's something that can do good. And it certainly there seems to be a need if statistics bear us out. And from a moral perspective, it certainly does. Judeo-Christian concept of love of neighbor would certainly undermine the whole thing, I think.
Well, and then piggyback that on the fact that there's a representative or a senator who wants to bring before Kentucky lawmakers to put a chunk of change for Ukrainian refugees, which I totally agree with, right? Yes, let's welcome them and help them resettle. But to say that on the one hand, right, let's set aside these millions or billions of dollars to do this work for our brothers and sisters coming from war. But on the other hand, let's take the food from the mouths of the babes that are already part of us here in the state. The double standard and the double message that it sends, it's driving me crazy. Makes no sense.
But that's the story often of American missionary activity, that we are more prone and inspired, motivated even to do missions with people outside of our nation than we are to do missions with people inside of our nation. You know, people from Louisville go on mission trips halfway across the world, but won't drive to the West End in order to do missions work with their neighbors. And so I think that speaks to that ideology that is so very rampant in our religious life today.
I think I agree with everything that has been said, but I think there's something else that needs to be put on the table. I do not see, from a Jewish perspective, I do not see the feeding of people who need food, especially children, to be any sort of charity whatsoever. It's interesting. In the Hebrew language, there is no word that one could translate as the English word charity. It doesn't exist. We do use another word, though. And that word is tzedakah, which means an act of justice. Charity is, to me, something that could be an option. You see the Salvation Army kettle in front of Kroger's November, December. Probably should be there all year, but you see it November, December. You are not compelled to put money in that. Either you do or you don't. When there is an issue like feeding people, I don't see it as there are no options. A person is hungry, you feed them, that's it. It's just what must be done. Our humanity compels us to do it.
So just to follow up, I mean, we're all eager to get rid of our masks and say COVID is over, but then we read the headlines that other countries are locking down again. And then part two, inflation, and Corrie mentioned gas prices. I mean, all these things are factoring in. This is not an over and out situation right now.
With the masking, masking is looser than it has been, but in the past week, 2 or 3 people I know have been positive for COVID. So where do you go? What's the story?
Yeah, I knew of someone yesterday who died of COVID. And so, I think that our society is so selfish and so hostile to the needs of our neighbors. I've been sorely disheartened with my work on the school board to hear the conversation and the characterization of people who are neighbors and friends, people that we ought to be looking after. And I'm concerned that we have stopped teaching our children to be good neighbors. And not just good neighbors, but to be good grandchildren. Unfortunately, I've had so many conversations and so many emails from people saying that old people don't matter. Seniors are at the end of their lives anyway. So why are we wearing masks? Why are we making our kids wear masks and limiting what they are able to do? And I just can't imagine anything much crueler to say and to instill in your children. And those things really, really, really concern me. But they're on the front page of our newspapers. That's the language on our television screens. And we're actually, I think, rearing a generation of children who will only be concerned about themselves, and they won't even do the simple things like wearing a mask in order to preserve the health of their grandparents. And that is a terrible state of being, in my opinion.
It's one of the things my understanding is religion and faith sometimes, and quite often, usually, must stand up against the standards of the society. It must be someone who be prophetic and challenge. For instance, everything you mentioned, Corrie, yes, what we're teaching, those people who are teaching their children, they're teaching them the American rugged individualism that supposedly our country was based upon. Well, it was based upon a lot of other things too, slavery and other things of this nature that founded this country. We really need to be prophetically challenging to those standards that you mentioned. I agree 100% with you that we are not teaching, and of course I have no children, but I see a lot of our children. Their concept in this country seems it's an entitlement they have rather than a right that has responsibilities.
Right.
Tony, I see you have the red, white, and blue ribbon in your in the room that you're tape recording from. And what is so disgusting is that the people who are saying freedom, 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 it's my right, and so on, they're wrapping this around some sort of malign vision of American patriotism. And that's not what American patriotism at its best represents. And that certainly isn't represented by the red, white, and blue.
Coming back to Corrie's statement about what it's teaching children, I spoke with a mom yesterday. Her husband is very autoimmune compromised, and they have a third grader, and the third grader came home saying, I don't have to wear a mask anymore, but I know I have to because of daddy, but my friends aren't. I mean, what are we teaching that hard spot for this precious third grader to be in of, I know I need to do this, but everybody else is doing that.
Peer pressure.
Yeah, it's sad and heartbreaking.
We're about halfway through the moral side of the news, and we're glad you're alongside. We'll get on to our second topic now. President Biden will travel to Brussels next week to meet the NATO leaders to, quote, reaffirm our ironclad commitment to our NATO allies. So says White House Press Secretary Jan Psaki. So turning to our panel, what more can NATO and the U.S. do to stop Putin's advances?
Well, the issue is whether or not we're willing to take the step towards further violence. And I would hope we're not, but I'm not ready to give up on diplomacy and whatever. Interesting article. It's in the current New Yorker magazine of some Russian specialists are looking at despots and Putin and Russia in general. And the history they lay out is enlightening. If this is, I presume it's basically researched and to be seen as true. But NATO and the U.S. together, they've been saying we outnumber the Russians, 100 to 1 regards to planes, to ships, to weapons, except for the atomic arsenal, nuclear arsenal. and that's the bailiwick. But what can we do? We have to be able to come up with something. One of my first comments is people in my congregation will say, we need to pray that God will do something about this. Well, yeah, but God doesn't always work in primary causality, as they say. God doesn't part the cloud and reach down and grab Mr. Putin and shake him a little bit. God primarily seems to work in history through secondary causality, meaning through his children, others, us. So NATO and ourselves and others, the world needs to step up in some form or fashion, say this and no further, because we do have a right. Ukraine has a right. Everyone has a right to defend themselves as persons, but that right extends also to countries. And so I think we're on the brink, as Zelensky said, we may be already in the midst of starting a third world war already. But the whole thing of Putin's rationality is in question as well. There's just something on the news today. One of his old KGB fellow folks, a number of them are coming out and say, this man is crazy. So if his own people are saying that, then anyway, I'm just waiting for you guys to chime in. I can keep on talking, but you guys chime in. So.
Yeah, I'm concerned about a third world war. I am also concerned about America continuing its track record of being the police of the world. For the past 55 years, we've been kind of caught up into this spiral of continuous warfare, which is related to the first topic that we talked about in this segment, that of poverty and hunger and homelessness in American cities. And we'll never be able to really deal with the issues of poverty until we reduce our emphasis on militarism. Militarism has wasted hundreds of billions, I'm sure probably trillions of dollars when you add up all of the costs for all of the wars that we've fought in the last 55 years. I'm concerned about that, but I'm also very concerned about the humanitarian crisis that is being caused by Putin's invasion of Ukraine. My hope would be that other European nations would first step up. It seems, being that this is in their backyard, that they would be more concerned about what is happening in Ukraine, and that they would put their militaries and their weaponry toward the effort of defeating Putin. But I am also concerned about what World War III could potentially look like. I don't believe it will be limited to what we're seeing on our television screens now, with buildings being bombed and communities being destroyed. I am sorely concerned about biological warfare. I'm sorely concerned about the technological invasions, such as what we saw with Putin just a few years ago in the 2016 presidential election, and we never really got to the bottom of that, it seemed. And I feel that World War III would be an amalgamation of biological warfare, of technological warfare, and probably some other kind of warfares that we haven't even been exposed to yet, that we're not aware of. And I think that creates a different experience. And so I think we should tread lightly.
I think we should tread lightly, but I also think that we have technology at our fingertips that we can make a difference for good. And what do I mean? It seems like this is the right time to crank up radio-free Europe for the 21st century. That would be more than just radio. Why? Because it's not the Russian people who are pushing this war. They're not like the people were in Germany before World War II, that they need land for conquest. What they need is the truth. So many of them, even without hearing the truth, are rebelling against this war. And we need to let these people have all of the information they can so that they, as citizens of Russia, can deal with Putin and his cronies.
It's interesting, isn't it, how this one personality has been the tipping point for all of this. As you said, so many Russians are against it. And to think of the power of this one person that we all think probably has some psychological problems or whatever, to do this act of invasion with a neighbor is it's astounding to me. And so it makes me think, okay, then let's step back and look at our own moral actions. How are we being the bulldozer to others? How are we treading where we should not, causing pain and sorrow? And Corrie, your comments earlier just really resonated deeply about right here in our own legislature. How can we be the voice that helps those voices who make the laws shift for justice and for moral action for the good? It can be disheartening.
It is disheartening. The statement was made to me, those who know what's really going on don't say, and those who say really don't know what's going on. I mean, it's one of the articles, again, I referred you to, indicates that Stan, you mentioned our technologies, and Corrie the same. Supposedly, there is some major activities going on the cyber war front that is basically backing Russia into a corner right now. And that may be the case, but again, the caution, being probably the oldest guy here, the caution I would have is basically looking at the nuclear option that someone who possibly is unstable can unleash upon the world. The biological, yes, that's also a possibility, but I worry more about the nuclear. I'm one of the kids that used to hide under our seats in the school because they had, the nuclear bomb, that was a so-called nuclear bomb, protection or something. Of course, if a nuclear bomb went off, that wouldn't protect anybody. So yes, the world's at a very, very tenuous crossroad right now in my mind. And again, I keep saying, people say, well, let's turn to the Lord in this. Okay, let's do, sure, certainly. But again, remembering again, the gifts and responsibilities God has given to us as children, we need to also take some responsibility in what we say. There's this point of the Holy Father today, by the way, I don't know if you heard, the Greek Orthodox prelate in Russia backs Putin on this going into Ukraine. The Holy Father, Pope Francis, today had a conference with him, and his statement was, in modern times, there can be no such thing as a just war. That concept is gone. No war is just. And so I think there's correctness.
Pope said that?
Pope Francis today.
Wow.
That no war can be just the way the war is set now. It's like, for instance, in our tradition, the death penalty too. We backed away from that, saying there cannot be justified either. But anyway, but I'm saying to you that we need more leadership, Harriet, as you were saying, to speak up even from our pulpits and our synagogues and whatever, against what's happening. And yes, if enough people are informed and enough of that information, Stan gets out there, the true information, maybe the world will change. So I'm keeping my mouth shut here.
All right, we've got about 4 minutes left in our program, Moral Side of the News, and let's end on an upbeat note, shall we? Recently on social media, a video went viral. Nicholas Baker called his third grade teacher out of the blue 21 years later just to say thank you and tell her what an influence she's had on his life. So turning to a panel, first of all, what a great act of kindness. And secondly, whom would you call to say thank you? Any thoughts?
I would call my debate coach in high school, because my speech and debate coach taught me how to communicate with people and not be nervous or frightened. His name is Don Moreland. He teaches now at Purdue University, I believe, if he's still teaching, and he is the world's foremost authority on the Three Stooges.
I thought long and hard about that question, John, and I'll be honest, I'm so old that most of the people I would want to call are in the kingdom now. And so
Well, maybe you can call collect and try it. Maybe it might work.
Yeah, I would probably get a busy signal if I did that. But no, my routine would be not that I can call and say thank you personally, but I can certainly do that in prayer. Looking at those who have gone before me, the Good Sisters of Charity of Nazareth, and we called them the Severians in the prep school. We used to say they beat a very good education into us, but they taught us to think. Just an example, I was at the prep school in Bardstown. In my freshman year, 90% of the freshman class were members of the National Honor Society. I mean, they really pushed it. Yes, they really did. So I would thank all those guys and gals for their basic understanding and pushing us to be more than what we thought we could be.
The person I thought about this as well, and the person I wish I had said this to was a theater coach I had early on, and she was hard-nosed and pushed us to the limits and would scream from the back of the theater, "All I want is perfection from you." And yet it made us give the most. But at the end of the day, her comment was always, "You are giving people an escape for a moment. So remember, that's a gift." And I so appreciated that. And that has ended up meaning more things in life than just performance, but all that we offer is a gift.
Corrie, how about you? Anybody come to mind?
That's so, all of you all's statements have been so profound. I think I would give that to Maxine Jones Brown. She lives in Savannah, Georgia today, and I try to call her at least every 3 months or so. She made a profound impact on my life educationally, and gave me confidence to do many of the things that I'm doing now.
Fantastic. I had a Spanish teacher in college. When you entered his classroom, you couldn't speak any English, and it made you think differently about how you would communicate and work your way around different phrases and words just to get the job done. And it's always stuck with me. His name was John Davis, Harper College. And that'll bring to a close this edition of Moral Side of the News. We thank our panel today, Harriett Akins-Banman, Corrie Shull, Stan Miles, and Tony Smith. If you'd like to catch this program again, you can do so. It's on YouTube. Just go to YouTube and search for Moral Side of the News. And also, panel, Moral Side is now a podcast, so look for Moral Side of the News wherever you get your podcasts. Until next week, thanks for your time. We'll be back again with another edition of our program. Until then, so long. Thank you, panel. The 69th annual WHAS Crusade for Children is set for June 4th and 5th. Just go to WHAScrusade.org and see all the ways you can make a donation to the Crusade for Children and make a secure donation online. That's at WHAScrusade.org. You can also mail your donation to 520 West Chestnut Street, Louisville, Kentucky, 40202. That's 520 West Chestnut Street, Louisville, Kentucky, 40202.